Hard things are hard. Being admitted to a top school requires hard work. It takes tenacity. It takes perseverance. It takes rolling your sleeves up and doing what is required. Hello, and welcome to the Admittedly podcast. My name is Thomas Caleel. I'm the former director of MBA admissions and financial aid for my alma mater, the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. In this podcast, I don't promise easy answers or quick fixes, but I will use my decades of experience to help you achieve your education goals. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Admittedly podcast. I'm your host, Thomas Caleel. We're deep into season 4, and today we're going to talk about something that I think is really important to the admissions process, and that is this. Hard things are hard. Being admitted to a top school requires hard work. It takes tenacity. It takes perseverance. It takes rolling your sleeves up and doing what is required. And I'm talking about this today for a couple of reasons. First of all, I've been getting a lot of really kind of aggressive comments on our social media at Admittedly Co. on Instagram and TikTok, in the DMs as well. People saying, and I did a podcast on this earlier, that I'm responsible for the destruction of childhood and ruining these children's lives. And so first of all, I do appreciate that people think I have that kind of power and control over the universe. I do not. But I want to talk about why there is, it seems this perception that school accomplishments, academic accomplishments, getting into tough schools is something that is almost owed in a way. And I want to break this down because when I look at other things that are hard, right? When you look at top companies to work for, when you look at, let's say, special forces in the military, when you look at Olympic athletes, nobody goes up to a top Olympic athlete and says, it's not fair. You know, I ran track in high school, so I should be in the same league as FloJo, right? Or Usain Bolt. That doesn't happen, right? Because you play football in high school does not mean that you deserve a spot on an NFL roster. There's a lot of blood, sweat, tears, effort that goes into getting from there to the pinnacle of achievement. There's a lot that goes into, for parents. When you're working, you have your careers, you might be at a firm, at a top firm. That's not by accident. That's hard work. That's a lot of sacrifice and diligence and things that you're doing year in, year out, the academic preparation, the networking, the relationship building. All of these things are critically important to your success. And it's no different trying to get admitted to a top school. And I want to talk about this a little bit too, because on some of my strategy calls with the Early Edge Plus students, I sometimes will encounter families saying, okay, give us a list of things to do. Just give us a list. And we have to have a long conversation in that case about the fact that there is no algorithm, right? There's no prescribed formula where I show up with a list and say, okay, do these things and you're going to get in. What this requires is the hard work of standing out. And standing out is terrifying, right? It would be much easier if I could just say, do this, do this, do this, and you're fine. But standing out requires taking risks, and taking risks are really, really important. You can't just be doing what everybody else is doing. And so a lot of the work I'm doing with these families, with my students, is digging in and saying, okay, let's think about what it is that you enjoy. Let's think about the resources available at our disposal. Let's think about who you know. Let's think about opportunities locally to you or nationally to you. Let's think about people that you've met. Let's think about relationships we have that we can approach. If you want to shadow somebody, that's a personal ask. It's something that maybe your mother, for example, is a surgeon and you're interested in medicine. And so your mother talks to some friends and finds somebody who's willing to let you shadow and learn. And that's great. Okay. That's a privilege. It's an advantage you have. But here's the thing. Once you show up minute one, the hard work begins. It actually begins before that. Why? Because you need to do your research. You need to understand, what does this doctor do? What do I need to be aware of walking into this practice? How do you present yourself? It's hard work. It's interacting with the other people in the office. It's doing the jobs that maybe sometimes nobody else wants to do. It's proving yourself day in, day out, so that you get additional responsibility. And the same thing goes with academics. You have to work hard. There's no substitute for working hard. Will you always get it right? Probably not. But again, if you're working hard, your teachers recognize that, your counselor recognizes that, that's something that's going to shine through in your recommendations. It's something that's going to shine through in your transcript, and something that colleges will respect. Why do I talk a lot about working jobs in the summer, working at fast food restaurants, working customer service, doing unglamorous hard work? Because an admissions officer can look at that and say, okay, this person went and did an internship at a hedge fund. And that's great. And I've had students that have done internships at hedge funds who've done really amazing work, and they will certainly shine through. But if you're just doing something easy, if you're just checking the box, as an admissions officer, I would much rather take the kid who rolled their sleeves up and worked 2 jobs. They worked McDonald's during the day, and then maybe they worked in an ice cream parlor at night, and they're learning about responsibility. They're learning about discipline. They're learning about customer service. They're learning how hard it is to actually make money. That's real business experience. But here's the thing. That alone is not enough, right? So what is enough? Well, you need to go in there and do the hard work. You need to have the mindset, right? So if you're working in an ice cream parlor, for example, you're looking around, you're thinking about, okay, what's my unit cost? How much does it cost to serve this scoop of ice cream? We charge $4. Okay, labor cost, rent, electricity, overhead, licensing fees, franchising fees, all of those things. You're thinking like a business person. You're breaking it down. You're going beyond, right? I mean, think about, let's say, special forces in the military, right? You can be a great soldier. You can be tough. You can be smart. But when you meet, let's say, Navy SEALs, and I've met more than a few. I admitted several Navy SEALs to Wharton. You meet them, and by and large, I hate to use the word unassuming, but you wouldn't necessarily know, right? Because you think in your head, you're like, oh, there's huge specimens of humanity. There's like chiseled out of granite, and they're 6'5", and they're just, you have this gleam in their eye. And some of them are. I mean, one of my very good friends at Wharton was an absolute just beast of a human being in the best possible way. But a lot of them, it's about mental discipline. It's about toughness. It's about willingness to go the extra mile when everything around you says no. And that is what admissions officers are looking for. How do you rise to the top of a sport or an art? If you go to the ballet and you see a professional ballet dancer dancing, what don't you see? You don't see the blood, the Band-Aids, the bruised toes, the exhaustion, all of the discipline and effort that goes into that couple minutes or couple hours of beauty and grace on the stage. So I think it's very important that we get through to students that, yes, this is hard work, and it's not for everybody. There's absolutely no shame in saying, okay, I understand what's required to go to an Ivy Plus school, and that's just not me. That's not how I want to live my life. I want to spend my summers doing other things. I want to have different experiences after school, and that's perfectly fine. There are amazing routes through community college, state colleges, smaller schools. There are so many institutes of higher education around the world that you can go get a fantastic education in and go on and be very successful in your life, however you define success. I think we've been caught up a lot thinking success means financial gain, but it can mean a lot of other things. It can be building a family, building a business that you're proud of, creating art, creating music, working in your community, serving your community through government or service. Whatever that looks like, you need to define success for yourself. And also, before people jump on me about the examples of the internships that I used, I want to make something very clear, because there's this misperception out there that money You can buy your way into Ivy League schools. And yes, certainly if you have money, it gives you access to private tutors. Might gives you access to private schools and things that are not accessible to the broader population. But if you listen to my podcast on why it's actually sometimes harder to get into a top school from a private boarding school, for example, you'll understand that admissions officers are always looking at context. They're looking at the context from where your accomplishments come from. And let me give you a great example, right? I had a student, first gen, super low income, unbelievable young man, and he worked construction to help literally put food on his family's table. This was not something he did for fun. It wasn't something he did for a resume. It was something where he was like, his mom was like, hey, we need this and we need you to contribute. And if you can keep going to school, that's great, but we need the money. And so he would go to construction sites and work. And during that process, he would see these people standing around a table and discussing things on big pieces of paper. And so he kind of walked over, he started eventually looking, asking questions. And he was like, wow, these architects, they're the ones that are designing these homes. That's so amazing. He was very artistic. He enjoyed art. He was like, this is such a great way for me to do something with this passion of mine, which is art. And so he saved up a little bit of money. He got some very rudimentary tools. He started taking out books from the library, teaching himself. Through his academic accomplishments, he got into a private academy on full scholarship. He started to learn. One of his counselors took an interest in him and signed him up for community college classes in architecture because he wasn't old enough. And he aced those classes. The college made an exception because of his age, let him take more classes. He applied to and was admitted to a very exclusive boarding school on the East Coast on a full scholarship and earned and fought and clawed his way to one of his dream schools and a program in architecture. He's an incredible human being. And this is what I'm talking about. It's hard. It's not easy. If you're first gen low income, nobody's going to admit you to school just because of that situation. Nobody's going to admit you to a school just because you come from a wealthy background. It's really, really important. I know there's a lot of rumor and innuendo out there. And yes, there was a time absolutely in the Ivy Leagues where if your parents had money, they could make donations, they could contribute to a building, they could do those things and get you in. Those days are long gone. And there's no way you can buy this. You have to do the work. There is no substitute for the work. So for those of you who think you can just sign up for a program or hire a counselor and you're home, you're on the home stretch, you're scot-free, nothing could be further from the truth. This is 100% dependent on you, because at the end of the day, when you're writing your application, those stories have to come from you. And some of the students I see that struggle the most in the admissions process are students whose parents, and again, I'm a parent, okay? I have a high school junior. I have an 8th grader going into boarding school next year, so I very much get this, right? The parents, in a very often well-meaning way, do everything for the child. Right. And so a lot of times I'll get on calls with families and I have to actually ask the parents, please stop talking. I want to hear from your child. I want to hear what their voice is. I want to hear their hopes, their dreams, their challenges, their questions. Because at the end of the day, when you're writing those essays, there's nowhere to hide. In order to write an effective essay, you have to be able to tell your own story. You have to know yourself. When we take families into the admittedly Early Edge Plus program, we ask them 40, 50 questions about who they are, what matters to them, what are they interested in, what do they do for fun? Because that's how we get to the heart of who you are, and that's how we're able to start pulling apart the threads of you and your interests, and we're able to kind of go in and say, okay, here are some really good ideas for you to evidence what it is, to pursue what it is that you say that you want to do. That is hard work. It's not for everyone, but I just want to make sure and reassure everybody, especially the students that are kind of struggling and they're like, I'm working so hard. Everybody else around me seems to be just coasting through. Everybody in high school is a duck. And what do I mean? It means on the surface, everyone is pretty much cool and calm and doing it right. And underneath the water, their legs are going a million miles an hour. The same is true in college, and the same absolutely is true in graduate school. Everybody is working hard. Everybody is struggling. Whether or not we show that outwardly is a personal decision, but I promise you, nobody is coasting through this easily. As we kind of wrap this up, I do want to talk about one of my very favorite books. I've talked about this before, How to Raise an Adult by Julie Lythcott-Haims. And she's exceptional. She was worked at Stanford, has deep experience. And here's what she has to say about hard work and having children. She says, prepare them for the hard work to come. Believing in yourself and having dreams is really important. But the other half of the equation, which there is simply no way around, is hard work. Being able to give your kid a reality check and constructive feedback are crucial. We do this by telling children what it actually takes to succeed in the real world. Hard work, relationship-based connections, perseverance, resilience, and some amount of good luck. So as we go forward in this process, I want you to know you're not alone. This is hard. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here at the Admittedly Podcast, on our socials, at Admittedly Co, on Instagram and TikTok. I'm here to help you understand that the work is hard, but it's doable. It's less hard if you know what to expect and you're intentional in your choices, because then you're doing things that matter to you and things that you care about, and you're able to get much better results without a lot of the extra stress that comes from doing things that you are not fully invested in. So you're not in this hard work alone. We're here to help you. Please follow along. I've got a lot more coming. Please make sure you join our free monthly webinars. Stay tuned for daily admissions content on our socials. And as always, thank you so much for following our podcast. Look forward to continuing this conversation. And I would encourage you to please, on our socials, go into the comments. Tell us what you find hard. I'm curious to know, what is it that challenges you? And what are some things maybe you've done to help yourself through that hard time? If you're stuck, let me know that as well. And I'd love to jump in and share my experience with you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Please take a moment to subscribe to the Admittedly Podcast and download this episode. I welcome you to share your thoughts and questions with me. You can find us on social media at Admittedly Podcast. I look forward to continuing our journey together.